So, hi, my name is Jennifer Reyes. I'm the Government Transformation and Outreach Coordinator at Everyday Canvassing. Thank you once again for joining us today. I would like to share a little information about who we are. So, we are a group of county employees and climate justice fellows who are part of the Climate Justice Co-Creation Initiative, also known as CJCI, and we jointly work together to create the Be Cool Montgomery campaign to help residents, workers, and employers prepare for the extreme heat. On this screen, you will see two QR codes. The one on the left-hand side will take you to the campaign website, and the one on the right-hand side will take you to the Maryland Occupational Safety and Health, or MOSH, website on heat stress. So MOSH is a state agency, part of the Maryland Division of Labor and Industry. So they are responsible for ensuring safe and healthy work conditions for employees throughout the state. Um, and then today I am joined by Mara Parker from the Office of Emergency Management and Homeland Security in Montgomery County to share more information about extreme heat. I'll pass it over to you, Mara.
Thank you so much, Jen. All right, we're going to start out by talking about how climate change impacts heat. How does it happen, and what is the impact that it's having in our community? A certain amount of greenhouse gases, such as carbon dioxide, are naturally occurring in our environment, and they're essential to maintaining a normal, healthy temperature that supports life on the planet. You can see in the graphic on the left that as solar radiation comes in, a certain amount of naturally occurring CO2 holds some of that radiated heat in the atmosphere, but lets most of it back out. And that's what happens in normal circumstances. But the burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas has had a dramatic effect in increasing the amount of greenhouse gases in our atmosphere. And the impact of that is that it is trapping heat and increasing our temperatures globally, which you can see how precisely the increase in carbon dioxide tracks with the increase in our average global temperature in the graphic on the right. Next slide, please. So what does that mean for us? Well, it means it's getting hotter, and today is a very appropriate day for us to discuss that as we're starting into a heat wave here locally. Heat waves, the reason we're talking about it today is the heat waves are among our most dangerous natural hazards, and they are expected to increase dramatically due to climate change. The projections that you can see in the calendars on the right show that historically about 4 days every year we had an average temperature daytime high of above 95 degrees. By 2035, we can expect to have an average of about 12 days per year with those temperatures above 95, which is already a 3 times greater number of days than what we've been experiencing. And the projections for the next century, the end of the century, is that we could have as much as 2 full months every year with temperatures above 95 degrees. It's important to note that in the county, we have extreme heat alerts that are issued to the public through Alert Montgomery when the temperatures or the heat index is projected to be at least 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we have heat emergency alerts, which are issued when the temperatures are projected to be at least 105 degrees for an extended period of time. And that also takes into consideration factors like nighttime lows and whether the temperatures dip sufficiently. So what does this mean for us? Let's go to the next slide. And why is that important? So extreme heat is deadly. It is, in fact, the leading cause of weather-related deaths in the United States and in the world. This is often a surprise to folks, but as you can see from this chart from 2024, when we had a very hot summer in the United States, there were 529 weather-related or heat-related fatalities. And in that particular year, that number was greater than all the other hazards on this slide combined. So the number of people who unfortunately lost their lives to heat is very, very high. Over the past 30 years, fatality rates for things like lightning, tornadoes, and hurricanes have declined as our ability to predict what's coming and help people prepare for those hazards has increased, but fatalities from flooding and heat are still on the rise. And that's why we're here today to talk about heat. So let's go to the next slide. So we can all feel these changes and see these changes. And one of the things that I think it's really important to understand is that these changes are not felt by everyone equally. For example, as our temperatures rise and we have an increasing number of heat waves as a result of climate change, there are certain parts of our communities that have a lot of pavement and impervious surface, that don't have a lot of tree canopy and cover, where that heat is absorbed in those areas and radiates back. They can be up to 20 degrees hotter than a neighboring community that's filled with trees, for example. And often those places experiencing urban heat island effect also have a lot of high density housing, multifamily housing buildings. And that means you have a lot of folks who live there who may be particularly vulnerable. It's also very important in those circumstances that your body has an opportunity to cool off in the evening, especially if your work or something about your life means that you need to be out in the heat during the daytime. So we'll have a little more conversations about that in a moment about those health implications. But because of that, access to air conditioning becomes really important, as well as other cooling strategies, like taking a cool shower or bath or using a pool to cool off your body. So there are a lot of conditions that can also be made worse by these factors. And they're also, so it's also important to keep in mind people who are more vulnerable, both outdoor workers who we're going to focus on today, but also the elderly. Oftentimes people have access to air conditioning, but they may not use it. They may not use it because culturally they haven't done it or historically they haven't, or it may be expensive for them to use. And so it becomes really important that we check on those folks and keep them in mind when we're experiencing a heat wave. Likewise, you have athletes, student athletes in particular, who experience heat stress when they're out practicing, particularly if they're on artificial turf fields or children who are on playgrounds um, with artificial surfaces, which can capture that heat and radiate it back. So it's good to check on people. So let's talk next about signs and symptoms. All right, so we're going to talk about heat exhaustion and then heat stroke. The signs of heat exhaustion include feeling faint or dizzy, excessive sweating, cool, pale, or clammy skin, experiencing nausea or vomiting, a rapid or weak pulse, and muscle cramps. If you or someone you see is experiencing those symptoms, it's important to get them to an air conditioned area or at least a shady area. You drink a lot of water. Use cooling towels that have been coated in water to cool your core body temperature and loosen clothing. Then we're going to talk about heat stroke symptoms. If you or someone you know is experiencing headaches, confusion or slurred speech, has hot, dry, or damp skin, a body temperature above 103 degrees, a rapid, strong pulse, or in the worst case, experiences unconsciousness, it is most important that the first step you take is to call 911. This is a medical emergency that can lead to death. You want to call 911, immediately move them to shade or cool area, soak them with cool water, literally pour it over their clothes if you need to. And you want to stay with that person until emergency services arrive. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Indigo Ferdinand, a climate fellow with the Office of the County Executive and a third-year Doctor of Public Health student and certified health education specialist, to talk more about the health implications of heat. Indigo?
Thank you, Mara. Good afternoon, everyone. As she stated, I am Indigo Ferdinand, and I will be covering prevention tips, how to help others, and conditions and medications that can increase your heat risk. There are many simple things one can do to stay cool on hot days, especially hot days on the job. First, drink 3 to 4 cups of water per hour. Be sure to drink throughout the day and not simply once per hour. Once you feel thirsty, you're already dehydrated. Also, wear light, breathable, light-colored clothing. Light and breathable clothing allows for airflow so that the body heat will not get trapped. Light colored clothing is also recommended because dark colored clothing absorbs plenty light from the sun. That absorbed light is converted into heat, making dark clothing 10 to 15 degrees hotter than light colored clothing, which reflects sunlight instead. Also, please use hats, cooling towels, and sunscreen. To be clear, sunscreen is to protect your skin and has no impact on direct heat risk. However, most high heat days come with plenty of sunlight, which increases skin cancer risk, so sunscreen is also very advantageous. Be sure to take breaks in the shade or a cooled area and start heavy tasks earlier in the day when possible to avoid the highest temperatures of the day. Next. In addition to taking care of yourself, we should also look out for our peers. Watch out for heat illness symptoms in your coworkers and know what to do when they are having a medical emergency. Also, remind each other to drink water and to rest. And speak up if something looks unsafe or if someone seems unwell. Next. Whether experience whether experiencing extreme heat on the job, at the park with your family, or on a walk to the store, there are some groups of people who have to consider their increased heat risk because of chronic conditions they may live with or medications they may take. So some conditions that increase your heat risk include heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, kidney disease, and specifically for kidney disease, in simpler terms, high temperatures cause severe fluid loss through sweat, which can cause acute kidney injury. And if that happens multiple times over time, that can weaken your kidneys. And fun fact, not so fun, extreme heat exposure actually causes spikes in kidney-related emergency room visits. So this is something to take special consideration for. We also have respiratory conditions like asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, obesity, and pregnancy. So pregnancy is considered a condition. Your body is going through something that it doesn't normally go through, and you have to consider the increased weight, but also the having more difficulty getting to cooler areas, but also more difficulty with your body wicking away heat. And on the right, we have a list of some medications that increase heat risk. So first, blood pressure medications. In general, blood pressure medications slow your heart rate, which can decrease your ability to handle heat stress. But also some blood pressure medications are diuretics, which make people urinate more frequently, which can contribute to dehydration. Then we have laxatives like Senokot, Dulcolax, or Miralax. In using stool softeners or laxatives, they are pulling water into your digestive system to help you use the restroom, which can also contribute to dehydration. Also, some ADHD medications like Adderall and Ritalin can make it harder for the body to handle heat. Some pain medications, especially NSAIDs like Aleve, Motrin, or Advil, can also make it harder for your body to handle heat. Allergy medications like Benadryl, Allegra, Zyrtec, Claritin, they can affect your ability to sweat and cool your body down, and some mental health medications as well, and some antibiotics like Accutane. Next, please. Why this matters and what you can do. So as I elaborated on in the previous slide, many of these conditions and medications impact your ability to sweat, which impacts your ability to cool down. They can also contribute to dehydration, slowing your heart rate, and how your body handles its temperature overall. So if you live with these conditions or have a loved one, a coworker, or if you take any of these medications, please drink more water or encourage them to drink more water. Take breaks earlier and more often. Deeply consider your personal needs when you are experiencing heat stress. Monitor your symptoms and talk with your healthcare provider about heat safety concerns. Please do not change or stop taking your medications simply because it is hot. Make sure you talk to your healthcare provider first to adjust as needed for you. Next slide, please. So next is our guest speaker, Christina Campbell Harris, who will be covering the Maryland heat stress regulations. Christina has been an industrial hygienist with Maryland Occupational Safety and Health, MOSH, for nearly 20 years as an inspector, instructor, and manager. She holds a bachelor's degree in clinical laboratory science and a master's degree in health science, and is a certified industrial hygienist. Thank you, Christina, for joining us.
Thank you, Indigo. So the Maryland Occupational Safety and Health heat stress regulations apply to employers and employees in the state of Maryland. The regulation has a pretty broad scope in terms of who is required as an employer to comply with the standard. So anytime the heat index is 80 degrees or greater, whether it's indoor or outdoor, the standard kicks into effect, and employers now have requirements and obligations under that standard to be able to protect their employees from heat-related illness and heat stress. One thing to note about the heat index, which we talk a lot about in the regulation, that is our measurement for heat and how we feel the heat. So that's our threshold. We're using the heat index as our threshold. The heat index does not take into account these radiant heat sources. So the sun would be considered a radiant heat source. And whenever we're talking about the heat index, it is typically taken into account without the sun or the radiant heat. Next slide. So when we talk about monitoring the heat index, this can be done a couple of different ways. So the regulations or the standard requires that once the heat index reaches 80 degrees, now we have to do certain things to be able to protect employees. One of the ways that we do that is monitoring the heat index throughout the day, and anytime that the heat index is anticipated to be at or above 80 degrees. So the heat index, if we are talking about inside work, indoors, the heat index has to be monitored using the temperature and the humidity. So that can be done with a thermometer and a hygrometer. A thermometer measures ambient temperature and a hygrometer measures relative humidity, and we can take those two numbers and extrapolate or find the heat index. If we're working outdoors, you can certainly take direct measurements the same way we would take them indoors, but you can also use National Weather Service data or other applications that can give you an idea of the heat index in the geographic location where you're working. There is a heat safety tool app that was developed by NIOSH and OSHA, and we can use this app one of two ways. So you can use it as a way to obtain the local weather data for your location, and you can also use it to plug in your taking direct readings. You can also use it to plug in your temperature and your humidity and extrapolate a heat index and have it calculate that for you. So we know that when the temperature goes up and we add in humidity to the temperature, we increase the real feel effect on the body. And so that heat index is a good indicator of what the real feel is on the body. But again, remember, it doesn't take into account any radiant heat sources like the sun, boilers, ovens, things like that. Next slide. So if you are taking direct readings, you can use a chart like this to extrapolate or to measure the heat index. So where on the top row, we have the temperature. You would find your ambient temperature, and then you would go down to on the left to find your relative humidity. So you're taking a temperature reading, ambient temperature reading, you have a relative humidity percent reading, and you come to the middle to find your heat index. Next slide. When we talk about heat and heat illness, acclimatization or acclimating is a really big part of being able to prevent heat illness and heat stress on the body. So when we are working outdoors or indoors and it's hot and there's a lot of humidity, our bodies are responding to those conditions. Now, what happens is over time, if we are exposed to those conditions continuously, our bodies learn to adapt and acclimatize, meaning that your body is better able to take in those conditions and the work conditions and respond better. So we become better at sweating. Our heart rate become better at regulating our heart rate and our blood pressure. So just like you would be going to the gym, let's say, the first day that you go to the gym is really, really hard, but day after day after day, your body becomes adapted to those conditions in that environment. And the same is true for heat. The first heat wave of the season, we know we have a lot of people that might have episodes of fainting or dizziness or nausea. And that is very common because the body is not used to those conditions that it is in. And the harder we're working, the more we're sweating, the more fluid we're losing, that those are conditions that can really affect our body's ability to be able to respond to the heat. So the more we are exposed to those conditions, the better able our bodies are to respond. So when we talk about being able to, get used to or acclimate to conditions, we want to have a period of acclimatization or a period of acclimating to the environment. We know that for most people, let's say we have young, healthy people not taking any medications, we know it takes them about 5 days, give or take, to acclimate. So when we're talking about acclimating to an environment, if you take someone off of their sofa and their air conditioning where they've been, all spring, and we introduce them to a very hot environment, we need to gradually introduce them to that environment. So a 20% increase day over day is what is recommended. And for some people, that's going to be a longer period of time. And for some people, who maybe run ultra marathons on the weekends, we might have a shorter period of time. But everybody is individual and different, of course. And those medications and those personal risk factors, those, all of the things about us that make us individuals can affect our ability to acclimate or acclimatize. One of the requirements of the regulation is to make sure that when we have employees that are in that acclimatization period, that we're using more tools to keep an eye on them, right? Because again, some people take longer, some people may not need as much time. So we want to make sure that when people are in that acclimatization period, that we have closer observation on them, that we have, maybe a buddy system, that we're in better communication with them by phone or radio, management. We want to make sure we're capturing any signs of heat-related illness before it becomes a problem. Next slide. So the acclimatization schedule, or the piece of the acclimatization, we want to make sure that as an employers are required to have a program or a plan to manage heat stress. And one of those components of the program is having an acclimatization schedule, or just having a way to document in writing how you are acclimating employees to a new hot environment. There are things that we can do to work within the confines of a normal, work day, meaning that we can take someone and, they can be in their normal working conditions for an hour to 2 hours. And then because we don't want to overload their body on the heat burden, we may move them to the job trailer, for example, for a period of time to let their body cool down. We can also use what we call alternative controls. So air conditioning, having misting fans, having cooling vests, those are all what we call alternative controls. So when we're acclimatizing, we want to expose the body to those normal conditions for short periods of time, increasing that day over day. And in the interim, we want to make sure the body has the ability to cool down, and we want to maintain that your internal core body temperature of that 98.7. That's what we're always trying to get back to. Okay, next slide. When we talk about drinking water, I know we talked about 3 to 4 cups every hour. Employees need to have access to drinking water that is cool, that's close to the work area. And because we know we can sweat up to 2.5 gallons in a day, we want to be able to replace that volume, or have the ability to replace that volume. So workers need to have access to at least 32 ounces of water, cool water, per person per hour. The water does not have to be provided all at the same time. If you have a plan to obtain more water, you just don't want to run out of water, but all of your employees that, are on your job site at your work facility need to be able to have access to that cool water, at least 32 ounces per person per hour. And when we talk about rest periods, so one of the components of the regulation is to provide, again, those cool down opportunities. Rest breaks, when we are providing them, they are required to be paid. If you are using, you can use a lunch break as an example, as part of a rest period. But if you are, if you normally would not pay someone for their lunch, break, then you would not have to pay them for that rest period in that time. But any other break that's occurring, a rest break that's occurring during the day, that does need to be paid. And again, that's similar to many other OSHA or most regulations where if it's a requirement of the standard, then it needs to be provided at no charge to employees by the employer. All rest periods should be taken in the shade. And again, we're using those rest periods as opportunities to let the body cool down. Next slide. The shade that you're providing can be provided in any number of ways. Traditionally speaking, if we're outdoors, if it is a canopy, let's say, or a tent, it needs to be open on at least 3 sides. It needs to be able to have airflow moving through it. It needs to be able, all shaded areas or rest areas need to be able to accommodate all of the employees that would be taking a break at any one time. They need to allow them to not only sit normally, but also be able to remove their personal protective equipment. And again, the idea is we want to allow that cooling. We want to facilitate that cooling. So if we have people too close together, if it's too enclosed and there's not enough air movement, that's not really effective. So we want to make sure that the shade that we're providing is effective and sufficient. Next slide. When we talk about ways that we can reduce the heat burden, we have a couple options available to us. Obviously, engineering controls like air conditioning, increasing ventilation, providing cooling fans or misting fans, using reflective shields to block heat or radiant heat, insulating hot surfaces if we're inside with oven, where we have ovens or boilers, for example, and then providing shade, of course, for outdoor work sites. On the administrative side, we want to make sure, we're acclimatizing or acclimating employees properly and gradually to be able to work up to the conditions that they normally would work in. Making sure that, we're reacclimating those people if they've been out for a vacation or if they've been out on a surgery, for example, and they've been out for a while. Extended absences, we have to reacclimate somebody. Similar to the gym example, if you have been away from the gym for a week or two and try to go back and do your normal routine, it's really hard. So we want to make sure we're reacclimating our bodies back to those conditions. And using work rest schedules to, again, allow the body to cool down. So, we have a period of work and then we have a period of rest, and, requiring or enforcing those breaks as needed. Limiting strenuous work, especially when the heat index is above 100 degrees. So if we're doing really heavy manual labor, maybe we move that to a morning, very early morning, or maybe we do that overnight, or somehow we adjust the schedule so that we are managing not only the work, but the time of the day when it's going to be, the most hot. We're managing those schedules, and then using relief workers as needed. Next slide. When the heat index gets to 90, there's a little bit more that we have to do. So remember, the threshold is 80 degrees. Now we have to provide water, rest, shade. And once we get to 90 degrees, now we have to either require or mandate breaks, or we have to provide alternative cooling methods. So once we get to 90 degrees, we need to make sure that, again, we're providing that opportunity for bodies to cool down. At 90 degrees, if you do nothing else, you have to provide a break to workers for at least 10 minutes every 2 hours. Next slide. And then once we get to a heat index of 100 or above, now we need to mandate breaks of 15 minutes for every hour worked. And again, we have the ability to be flexible in how we are offering the ability to cool down. So if we don't have any alternative cooling methods or controls available to us, then we have to use the breaks. But where we have alternative methods or other cooling methods to allow the body to cool down, we can adjust and be flexible with that. Next slide. So when you have alternative cooling measures available that you're providing either in addition to or in lieu of a rest break or shade or something like that, we have to make sure that number one, they're readily available to all employees at all times, everywhere that work is being performed. And those controls need to be maintained. So if we have, for example, a misting fan, and one of the elements of the misting fan is the ability to provide cool misting water. If the water is hot, then it's not being maintained, right? So want to make sure that those are available to workers, and then obviously documenting those in your program or your plan. Next slide. One of the requirements of the regulation is to provide training to workers. So we want to provide training prior to employees being exposed to the heat, and making sure that we're retraining those employees at least every year, again, prior to, the first heat wave of the season, and making sure that every time there's a suspected or confirmed work-related, heat-related illness, in the workplace, then retraining has to occur again. And the reason for that is because if we've reached a point where someone is experiencing heat-related illness like heat exhaustion or heat stroke, then something has not been communicated, right? We need to retrain both employees to make sure that they are looking out for each other, retrain those supervisors to make sure that they understand, what needs to happen in terms of cooling a body down, making sure that we don't get to that point to begin with. Maybe we're adjusting the work. So those are the three times when training or retraining has to occur: prior to first exposure to heat, at least annually, and anytime there's a suspected or confirmed heat-related illness at the job site. The training does need to be in a language that all employees can understand. And that goes for supervisors, employees, managers, everybody. So the training needs to be in a language that's understandable for them. One of the couple of things that you want to make sure that you include in your training: so the environmental and the work conditions, the personal risk factors that could affect heat illness, what the methods are for acclimatization in your workplace, the importance of water and consuming that water every 3 to 4 cups every 15 to 20 minutes, and making sure they're staying hydrated. We want to talk about the signs and symptoms of heat-related illness, how to recognize them in yourself and also other people, what the employer's procedures are for reporting heat illness, and then how the employer is complying with all of the requirements of the regulation. We want to maintain those training records for at least a year, and include the names, the dates, and a summary or outline of the contents. Next slide. And your prevention plan, much like every other MOSH or OSHA plan, make sure that everything is in writing, right? So all of these elements that we have talked about in terms of acclimatization, access to shade, drinking water, high heat procedures, your emergency response procedures, and your training all have to be documented in your plan. This is just an outline or a template for how you are doing this in practice, how you are providing all of these things in and implementing them. Next slide. Oh, and I'll turn it over to Angie, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for sharing. Hi, guys. I'm Angela with Everyday Canvassing, and I'd like to share a few examples of heat safety practices in the workplace. If we look at the center photo, a crane operator lifted a cooler filled with cold water and electrolyte drinks up to workers who are working at an elevator location. This is a great example of making sure workers have access to hydration even when they're working high above the ground. And at the bottom left, you'll notice a hydration log. Hydration logs can help workers keep track of their water intake and serve as a reminder to stay hydrated throughout the workday. And of course, as you can see in the other photos, there are additional heat safety measures being used. We see shaded areas where workers can rest and cool down, as well as workplace heat stress guidelines that help workers and employees know what precautions to take at temperature increases. Next slide, please. And in here, we see more examples of workers accessing water designated cooling areas. In the top left, you'll notice that the umbrellas are adjustable and can be moved throughout the day to follow the sun and provided a large shaded area for workers. In the lower left, you'll also notice that the area includes signs about heat safety and hydration. These reminders help keep heat safety visible and encourage workers to drink water, take breaks, and recognize the sign of heat-related illness. These are all important ways to reduce the risk of heat-related illness and keep workers safe during hot weathers. Next slide. Now that we looked at a few examples, I'd like everyone to think about their own workplace. Where is drinking water located? Where are the shaded rest areas? And what are your workplace communication and emergency procedures if someone begins experiencing a heat-related illness? These are important questions because when temperature rises, workers shouldn't have to figure these things out in the moment. Knowing where to get water, where to go down, and who to contact in an emergency can make a big difference in preventing serious heat-related illness. Keeping these questions in mind can help create a safer workplace for everyone during periods of extreme heat. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Amos for our final slide.
Hello, everyone. I'll be sharing information as to resources and how you can get involved with the campaign. My name is Amos Thon, and I'm CJCI fellow. So we have this two QR codes, one on the right and one on the left. Please use the QR code on the left to visit our Be Cool Montgomery website, where you can find information shared today, printable resources, and links to other extreme heat tools and websites. One resource we would like to highlight is the supervisor checklist, which is in English and French. It was designed to help with daily checks for extreme heat safety at the workplace. So supervisors can use this to be able to ensure that they work appropriately with their employees. A recording of this presentation will also be made available on the website. The website is also where you can find future events like this one. Please use the QR code on the right to visit the March Heat Stress website, where you can find more information about the regulation and where complaints can be sent. And how you can get involved, we hope you help to spread the word to others in your community about how to spot the signs of heat illness and how to stay safe in extreme heat. Because together we create this awareness and more people will get involved. And with this, I hand you over to our next presenter, Mina, for questions and answers.
Thank you so much, Amos. Hi, everyone. I am Mina Torub, and I would like to thank all our presenters for presenting this insightful presentation. For this part of our webinar, I and my friend Mara would like to go ahead and open the Q&A or the question and answer section.
So our first question is the site supervisor requirements checklist also available in Spanish? So, and the answer to that question would be yes. The extreme heat
Yes,
site
it is
supervisor.
available in English and French, sorry. Okay.
English and Spanish, yes.
In Spanish.
We are planning to expand to other languages over time, but at the moment it's only available in English and Spanish. Thank you.
The next question is, if I want to access any of these resources, posters, flyers, where can I find them?
I'll take that on the Mosh side. So Mosh has posters available both online and in print. And if you go to our website, you can request those. OSHA also has a lot of really good resources, OSHA.gov. And if we can help you, if Mosh or OSHA can help get those to you, just let us know. We'll be happy to get them out to you.
Thank you, Christina. And as far as county resources, you can go to montgomerykountymd.gov/be cool, or you can Google Be Cool Montgomery, and it should be the first link to pop up. Towards the bottom of the page, you can find the supervisor checklist shown on the screen, also a flyer in English and in Spanish, either double-sided or one-sided with both languages. That was illustrated earlier in the PowerPoint when Mara was talking about heat illness. That's also available. Thank you.
And the next question we have, if I have a complaint about my employer not following the requirements for the heat stress standards, can I submit my complaint anonymously?
You can submit a complaint to Mosh, and you can submit your information to us and request to have your information and your name and everything remain anonymous or remain confidential.
Okay, thank you so much. And Adriana, do you have more questions?
Okay, so we're not seeing any additional questions in the chat. So thank you so much for those that did ask questions. We hope you really enjoyed this conversation. We did enjoy the conversation, and we hope that the answers were helpful. We did want to let you know, as most mentioned previously, that the recording of this presentation will be available on our website, so you can watch it again whenever you would like, or share it to anyone who maybe wasn't able to attend the webinar today. After this session, we will be sharing with you the complete recording of today's presentation, and we strongly encourage you to share this presentation with your family, your friends, your colleagues, your neighbor. The more people that have access to this information, the better. Together, we can help this message reach further. We also will be sharing a short quiz related to the topics we covered today, just a simple and quick way to review what we've learned. And once again, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Your time and participation mean a great deal to us. We wish you a wonderful afternoon and see you all soon. Bye. Oh, I see someone raise their hand, actually. Do you have a question?
I imagine they would like to speak. Do we want to do that or have them speak in the chat?
Yeah, if you could drop your question or comment in the chat. I'm not sure how to unmute.
I can do it if we're okay.
Awesome. Sure.
Hello. You had a question? Your mic should be working now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I am so sorry. I just wanted to click on the emoji and then by mistake I clicked on raise the hand. Anyway, the
Awesome.
presentation was amazing. Thank you so much. We will pay attention to our volunteers in the organization as we use a lot of them during the summer, food distribution and all that. I learned a lot and thank you so much.
Thank
Awesome. No, thank
you.
you so much. See you all later.